Generali, partner di vita. Generali, partner di vita.
Buonasera.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I would like in particular to greet all those who are following us from home or who are connected from the over 120 cities and who have followed the sessions of the meeting this week. I am particularly honored to host this session, which comes at the very end of a very rich in content and intense meeting edition that we started last August the 18th and that we are concluding today. We had lots of sessions during which we faced and dealt with many important issues which are so important for contemporary life and the future. We have addressed issues concerning the future when, for example, concerning work or the care of people. And we also focused on subsidiarity and sustainability, thereby dealing with a lot of aspects that pertain to contemporary life. Today, I am particularly honored to have the chance to focus on a crucial life, which is life in cities. We have touched this topic by discussing these days, for example, issues like green mobility or tourism or urban mobility. And we've recently finished a discussion with Nobel Peace Prize winner Yunus. And therefore, I would like to bring these topics also to the attention and to greet you, my guests. I would like to introduce you Gnassi, the mayor of Rimini, then the mayor of Milan, Giuseppe Sala. Thank you very much for being connected with us. Good afternoon, Giuseppe. And I would also like to thank Andy Bow, senior partner at Foster and Partners, who accepted our invitation to discuss these issues with us today.
Thanks a lot. Abbiamo anche
We also have the contribution by the mayor of Madrid, who unfortunately didn't have the chance to be live with us, but he recorded a message on today's topic, which is living and working in cities. What will change in our metropolis? This is a topic which is of crucial importance, and facing this topic today is, of course, completely different than it could have been a couple of months ago. Before showing you the contribution by the mayor of Madrid, Martínez-Almeida, I just wanted to highlight what the two main topics are that we wanted to bring to your attention. These two aspects are, first of all, we would like to think more in the medium and long term, and we would like to understand, together with our guests, what prospects we can identify for the next 10 years. We would like to understand how, over the next 10 years, the urban development of a town can change in view of what is currently taking place, in view of the pandemic, which has brought havoc in everybody's lives. The second aspect, we would like to focus on the crucial aspects that we can focus on, that we can lever on to make our own town more attractive in terms of life and work and as a place to live. I would like to start with the contribution from Madrid, and then I would like to leave the floor to our guests. First of all, I would like to thank the Rimini meeting for the possibility they've given me to speak here from Madrid, which is one of the cities that has been hit the most from the pandemic. This is a city where the inhabitants have shown great resilience. And this is very much in line with the concept of the meeting, which is rebuilding together. Can we build a better future, a better society? We've gone through a traumatic experience, that's for sure. But if we've learned something well, we've learned the fact that together we are stronger. So besides the differences, we can definitely bring a better society. So thanks again for this kind invitation and for the possibility you've given us to share some reflections on the future of cities. I believe cities will play an increasingly important role, and cities have shown that our strengths have actually been our weaknesses. What do I mean by this? I mean that we will have to work very, very hard to overcome these weaknesses and to be able and continue insisting on strengths to make sure that cities are easier to live, that they have a better quality of life and more attractive in order for them to be more appealing also for tourists. The image of city and urban development that we would like to work on over the next 10 years will be influenced by the consequences of the pandemic. And in this respect, we will have to work to increase the quality of life of those who live in Madrid and also to increase the attractiveness of the city for those who come and visit it. These are some of the factors that will be fundamental for us, for all cities, including Madrid. First of all, sustainability. Sustainability to be intended not only in terms of mobility, which is paramount, it is decisive, of course, but sustainability from any point of view, from the point of view of any aspect that pertains to the life of every citizen. That's why in Madrid we have an environmental sustainability project, which is Madrid. It's called Madrid 360. This means we are looking at all neighborhoods, at the entire city, but at the same time we would like to consider also all the aspects of daily life and work on these aspects from the point of view of sustainability. We would like to pay a lot of efforts to fight against climate change, to adopt climate mitigation actions. Without sustainability, we won't have any future for Madrid. And that is why this is fundamental. And then secondly, digital transformation. This will, of course, impact the quality of life of Madrid's inhabitants and our guests and our visitors. And that's important also to better manage public services. And this will certainly help us offer more services to citizens. These are two fundamental pillars that will characterize the future of the city of Madrid. At the same time, we will have to work for the city to be closer. The pandemic in Madrid taught us important lessons. Madrid ranks second in Europe in terms of population, so we have rediscovered our neighborhoods. We have rediscovered that mobility doesn't necessarily mean that you have to travel long stretches, long distances, but your life can also take place, for example, when traveling short distances, when you go to the local shop, to the local restaurant. This means that you can live a more comfortable and nicer life. And so as a municipality of Madrid, we would also like to strengthen remote work, telework, so as to better combine family life and professional life. These, I believe, are the fundamental pillars for any city, and also for the future of the city of Madrid. That should be a more sustainable and livable city. If we are able to reach this objective, if we want to learn the lesson from the coronavirus pandemic, I think this will be the guidelines for the future. Madrid is a great city, it's a great capital of the world, so the strengths have become weaknesses. Let us never forget this. The high population density, being a communication hub, being the biggest destination for foreign investments from all over Spain, or the mobilization of great movements. I mean, these are all things that sometimes have brought us to make mistakes, and we have to learn from these mistakes. And these are the challenges that Madrid will have to face for the next 10 years. Our roadmap first and foremost concerns environmental sustainability, so Environment 360, with a number of measures aiming at sustainability, and which focus on sustainability, ultimately sustainability in a city with a low quality, with a poor air quality. Madrid is negative, and so we are basically have to improve that. Actually, 50% of the pollution is created because of this, and with sustainability, we have to do something important also in our daily actions. For example, recycling, or the use of alternative mobility vehicles, or for example our own awareness concerning the circular economy and the reuse of consumption goods, which is also decisive to reach the goal of sustainability. Plus, there are also actions that we as a public administration can carry out, for example, for waste management. In other words, there's a whole series of actions that concern the whole of society. But at the same time, this will help us progress along this sustainability roadmap, because it is fundamental that all sectors of economic and social sectors progress, including the cooperation between public and private sector, because we can all play a role to improve the life in Madrid, and we must all be aware of this. It is from the individual responsibility that we can progress. We individually can play our role, and we can build our better society in the city of Madrid. For example, let us move back to the example of the pandemic. That was overcome thanks to everybody's individual behavior, and now we have to do the same with sustainability. That doesn't come from institutions. Sustainability stems from our own action. So we need to be aware, to become more aware. And so we want to work from this strategy, Madrid 360, which pertains the whole city, to continue progressing. The roadmap pertains us all, so concerning digital transformation, that is also linked to the leadership of our institutions. As a municipality, we cannot ask our citizens, we cannot demand our citizens that they transform themselves. Knowledge is fundamental to overcome the pandemic. Without knowledge, we won't overcome the coronavirus. So knowledge, study, research will be pivotal elements. So we have to tell our citizens that we want to serve as the leading actors, as leading players in this process. If public services are not managed better or more with digital transformation, if we're not capable of providing more services to our citizens, well, then we cannot ask them to comply with certain rules. So there must be this public-private collaboration in which the municipality has the leadership. We are making our best efforts. We are putting in place, we're setting up cross-cutting facilities all over the municipality to provide a final momentum to this transformation. And at the same time, we're also collaborating with the private sector so that it can help us to have a better vision of the future, starting from the digital transformation. These are decisive elements. However, the most important asset to transform Madrid is Madrid's inhabitants. In other words, not only the ones who were born in Madrid, but those who live in Madrid, irrespective of their origin or their thought. I mean, these are things that are not interesting for us. What's important for us is that if they live here, they are already inhabitants of Madrid. So we count on them to build Madrid in its future, Madrid in 10 years. That's a big advantage in Madrid. All mayors would say the same of their citizens, but what I can tell you, being so proud of my city, is that the best future of Madrid is the Madrid's inhabitants. So the best future for our city is the work of our inhabitants. So this challenge will be won with the efforts of everybody, of those who were born here or who've come here to stay. So let me draw to a close. Along this roadmap, we have to rebuild together. That's the key. We all have to join forces. All those who want to give a contribution, who want to reach this objective, they have to be given the chance to do it. No one should be left aside. All those who want to help us have to be included in the process. All those who want to give a hand have to be given the chance to do it. So rebuilding together will be the future and the key to this process. Thank you very much to the contribution of the Mayor of Madrid. I think that he's already given us a number of keywords that we can then analyze more in detail. So some strengths and weaknesses. He also talked about methodological issues, in other words, how we can build together. I would like to start our conversation by leaving the floor to Andy Bow, and I would like to ask him to basically go into the details of the first question that we set ourselves at the beginning? In other words, what is the image of city that you envisage for the next 10 years in the light of what has happened in recent months? Andy Bow, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to join you from London. And obviously, these are very difficult times for all of us. London, just like Madrid, has been hit very hard. And all of our families and friends and colleagues have been affected by this in some way. So it's hard to be positive. However, as architects, we are born optimists. We believe that we can leave the world in a better place. So I'll try and think about the things that were positive during the lockdown. And it was interesting. The first thing that happened was the weather was really good. And the planes stopped flying and the trains stopped running and the cars stopped moving and the air was fresher. And London fell silent. It became a time where we could stop and think and reflect upon the London that we really wanted in the future. There was no daily commute. And so we could spend our time in other ways. I took to Tai Chi in the morning and walking and cycling in the afternoon instead of the commute. And so there was less noise and air pollution. We could open our windows. We were using less energy in terms of not having to run air conditioning. When we opened our windows, we could hear the birds sing and wildlife was coming back into the city. Basically, in my 30 years in London, it was the best I'd ever seen it. And with the rise of online shopping, which is a challenge for local high streets, what we found was that the great indoors had become the great outdoors. And really, London became a city of 1,000 villages. And so we'd walk and cycle through the streets that were very quiet, and we'd go and get the provisions that everybody needed. And that was a really interesting time. And I think that the high streets are adapting very quickly here. We see a lot more high-speed Wi-Fi centers. We see places where people will go and have business meetings, and we'll see virtual presentation suites. And these are adaptations to the new ways that we're living and working now. I mean, one of the other positive benefits of the pandemic was we got to spend more time with our families and be at home. And of course, we were connecting online more regularly to our friends. One of the most important things that happened in many other cities as well. And that was every Thursday, we came out and we came onto the streets, we came onto the balconies, we came onto the rooftops, and we applauded for the NHS, for our key workers. And where I live in an apartment block, for the last 2.5 years, I'd only known the old lady who lived next door. But every Thursday I got to know more and more people, and we became friends, and it was wonderful. And so we met our new neighbours, we made more friends, and we found out the people who were vulnerable, and we helped them. So the truth is that London became a much more caring place and a much nicer place to be. And London at the moment is a bit like a bath that's starting to fill again. Our roads are getting busier and our buildings are getting busier in the city centre. My grandson is 1. In 10 years' time, when he's 11, what kind of London would I like him to be in? Well, I think it's the London that I really saw during the lockdown. And despite all the trouble that we were all having, all the uncertainties about jobs and paying bills and mortgages, I think there was an enormous amount of positives to be taken from it. Overall, I think London has become healthier, safer in the aspect that when there were fewer cars on the road, there was less air and noise pollution, there were less traffic accidents. We had more time because we weren't commuting, and it just felt brighter and happier and greener and friendlier. So that's my hope. And I'll go on to elaborate a little bit more how we're going to implement these things in other cities. But my appeal to any Londoners that may be online, and if I can influence anyone in any of these other great cities, is that we must remember about these better aspects that emerged during the pandemic. That's my hope for the next 10 years.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Andy. This is certainly a very interesting point of view. This is also, to a certain extent, even a provocation, because you are highlighting some aspects, some positive aspects that sometimes are not adequately highlighted. So I'd like to ask the mayor of Milan, Beppe Sala, another question. He had the task of leading a city that was one of the cities that was most hit in Lombardy during the pandemic, and he did so in a city which is, like Madrid, a hub of development and a very lively city, especially in recent years it has been so. So the question that we started from, if asked to Beppe Sala, is even more interesting, because I believe that Beppe Sala can certainly give us a much broader overview. So Beppe Sala, you have the floor. Thank you very much again for being with us. Thank you, and thanks for your kind invitation and greetings to my colleagues. I think that what Andy Bow has said is really meaningful. Although it is a partial analysis, my fear is that the picture he has sketched refers to people or parts of the city which are in a way protected. So parts of the cities in which people live who still have a job and who have not lost their jobs and who can appreciate these things. I mean, what he says is right. The climate has improved. We have found more time for ourselves. And yet, there has been a part of our citizens, there still is a part of our citizens who are paying a high price for the pandemic. So clearly, in 2019, in Milan, when you have 10 million tourists, and this year you have so few tourists, well, many people want work, are not working. But let's look to the future. Mario Draghi inaugurated the Rimini meeting by expressing trust, and that was also a call for responsibility to our young people. And I would like to start from what he said. I've read what Saskia Sarsen has written. She's a sociologist at Columbia University in New York. And basically she said that cities showed their vulnerability, but at the same time, they also showed the strength of solidarity. And she also adds that young people can play a major role in this, because young people are more likely to question a system of values, which is the system of values that is currently leading our lives. For example, they are the ones who are more likely to embrace sustainability, environmental sustainability, and also because young people are the ones who are more likely to look for different original places to interpret the new world. I strongly believe in this. I strongly believe in that this is actually the task that cities have. There is no golden recipe. What my colleague from Madrid says, well, I perfectly agree with him. However, if we want to try and give a contribution,
le grandi città devono fare quello che io.
Well, I think that what big cities can do, and this is at least what I intend to propose for Milan, is basically based on three main rules. So if I were to provide three main suggestions, I would say the following. First, we should try and not be nostalgic of the past. So we should not be too hasty in coming back to what we used to be before. And that is because this situation has changed. It has radically changed. So we have to make the effort and believe that we are living in a new social dimension with new priorities. So social equality, environmental sustainability, digital transformation, all this provides something new. So the first fundamental thing to do is that we have to believe that we can and we must change. Second, I think it is everybody's politicians, and as a mayor, I feel this task very much. The task of any politician is that we should make clear to our citizens what we intend to do to support those who are in difficulty. We need to make clear what we intend to do to relaunch the city. We need to work in the short run and meet the needs of those who are now jobless, who are now in difficulty. We need to try and adopt a subsidiary policy, a policy based on subsidiarity, but at the same time, we shouldn't lose our vision. We should always keep in mind what our long-term investment should be. And here I think we should be very, very clear. You cannot be friends to everybody. You cannot meet the needs of everybody. We have to be clear to your citizens. You have to tell them, these are the things I can do, these are the things that I cannot do. And that's a second rule, which is not banal at all for a politician. All too often, politicians tend to tell everybody that you can solve their problems, that you can do something for them, for everybody. Sometimes that is simply not possible. And then there's a third recommendation, a third issue, which is even more difficult. We have to make clear among us what segments of the population will have to focus on most. I mentioned one segment, young people, youth, the youth. We have to call them to their responsibility. We have to protect them, help them change their work and solve their problems. For example, in Milan, the housing problem is a problem for young people. But it's not only young people. I mean, there are also other segments. For example, within the world of creativity, there are certain segments of the population who are more inclined to change. Then you have foreign communities, and sometimes these foreign communities are very willing. They've come from foreign countries, and they are accustomed to question their conditions. So the world of solidarity. I'd like to add a remark which doesn't aim at being a provocation, which is the following. We as mayors should not be complacent to everybody. We should not look for dialogue with those who are normally closer to us, but our task is to listen to the voices of those who are most of the times the furthest away from us. So change will take place in time in the city, and politics can influence it, but only up to a certain extent. This should not be an alibi so as to say that everybody has to do their part. We as politicians have to play our role, and we have to be brave in doing so. So if these principles can be shared, well, then they have to be applied. We have to make decisions, and we have to be clear in these decisions. So I believe that these are the bases that can be used for Milan to restart again. I think it can do it because I can perceive this in Milan. I can feel this. I can feel that my city is really willing to transform the city, especially from an environmental and digital point of view. Thank you very much. You sort of launched an appeal to responsibility, and you gave us three main guidelines. So we are interested in knowing whether they are shared, if they can be shared. They, of course, pertain to a city which is completely different, like that of Rimini. Rimini is a small town. It has, for Rimini, tourism is very important. So, Mayor Gnassi, you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Bo. Hello, Pepe. What Mayor Sala said are the usual questions mayors ask themselves, not only in big cities, but also in smaller cities. For instance, our city is a city that fits somehow into the topics mentioned by Mr. Bo and Mayor Sala, because Romagna is the California of Italy. We have 1 million inhabitants in the Romagna area, that is this territory, and we have 60 million tourists, and 45 millions come here. In this province, we have 28 million tourists every year. We have 2,700 hotels, so we have a system of services that are connected to these tourists. So all these services are designed for city users. We have congress facilities and all the related services. Cities that base their economies on relations have to come to grips to the same challenges that larger cities have to face. Well, to me, there is another aspect, a more romantic aspect maybe. And of course, all mayors had to face the tragedy of the COVID pandemic, but somehow we rediscover the romantic side of our cities, like small next-door shops, clean air, the social fabric of local relations. So people have helped each other, trying to do the things that maybe institutions were not able to do. So somehow the planet, also seen from above, from outer space, is cleaner. It seems to breathe better. And of course, as a country, we also need to understand which are the essential services that need to be complied with 24/7. Of course, healthcare services and healthcare has emerged as the #1 priority for communities. And certainly, this is there to remain over the next 20, 30 years. And this applies to large cities, but also to smaller cities. Well, this applies to anywhere. On top of that, we need to understand how to cope with the post-pandemic period, because we will certainly need to make radical choices. We need to think about strategic planning, but also about short-term problems like maybe a kindergarten cannot reopen, a company that has problems, a hospital that is losing beds. Well, up until 2 months ago, 2,500 hotels thought they could not reopen, but then many tried to do their best to reopen. So again, we need to find new horizons for development. And here comes responsibility and strategic planning. Italy is not used to long-term strategic planning. Unfortunately, our political institutional system forces us to go and have elections every 6 months. And unfortunately, our country cannot rely on stable long-term institutions. So there are too many and too frequent political changes. And allow me to say that Italy should reorganize itself as a country, maybe with more autonomy to the local level, maybe with a federal form of government. Because strategic planning means exactly that. You need to respond to short-term needs, but you should also keep an eye on a longer 10 to 20 years horizon, because that is the time horizon that can change a city. And I think about what Andy Bo said, because we then need to find the resources to somehow implement things, because, okay, urban regeneration, sustainable development, energy transformation are somehow sort of assumptions that we all agree upon, but then maybe just Mr. Trump thinks differently. But then you need to find levers, you need to find resources to transform all that into reality. And for decades, real estate strategies and development strategies have been the only ones that have been pursued, and they have been considered as the only source of profit. And this is a big issue because COVID somehow forced us to face new needs. We need more time, more health, more environment. So the real estate business that has somehow overused our territory, so need to be put at stake and rediscussed. When it comes to the energy transition, the creativity world, those are fields where new jobs can be created and new opportunities. So strategic planning is the only way to find long-term answers. And I'm thinking about our Adriatic coast. 10 years ago, we decided to adopt a new strategy because a zero consumption approach, it's not an option because we need to find doable things. But we are Rimini, we are close to the Adriatic Sea, and we decided to clean the waters and so life below water, the UN 2030 agenda, measure number 14, and we have carried out a cleaning action on our sewage system, and we have become a best practice. So again, we have made a choice that will show its results in 10 years' time. And again, it's because, of course, it's impossible to satisfy everybody, but now our seaside, 40 kilometers of waterfront, and that required some time ago an intervention by the foster practice, and we decided to bring back to that seaside area facilities that are not strictly related to short-term profit realities, but after redoing the sewage system, we have thought about solutions for well-being and health. Together with the University of Bologna and our healthcare units, we have come up with this. Every 100 meters, there are going to be some special health and wellness urban stations, and even chronic diseases, people suffering from diabetes or other diseases, for instance, like cardiovascular diseases or cancers, can find health stations with outdoor sorts of gym-like facilities that improve the health of our citizens. Well, COVID somehow put a spotlight on these topics because, creating seaside areas that promote health and greeneries, it's something that today seems to be obvious, but it was not 10 years ago to make such a choice. But it is important to make daring choices, but sometimes these daring choices are considered as inconvenient because they go against the interests of lobbies, but they are in favor of the future of people. That said, I think that the role of national governments, of the Italian government, but also of the EU, if we think about the recovery fund and the resources that are going to be made available, it's very specific. Europe, the national governments should make specific choices in this sense. And through the urban town plans, we should then bring about facts. So the national government, the EU, should somehow accompany and support and sustain the cities that are going to make these daring choices. But this is a question mark. I hope that they will do so, but I'm not sure, because when it comes to distributing resources, of course, you try to give a little piece of the cake everybody. But I hope that strategic plans will be somehow recognized, because it's not about I mean, just making radical choices. Then radical choices need to be supported with the financial resources, and the recovery fund is a big opportunity. So cities making strategic planning should be awarded special attention. So now I would like to go back to Andy Bow, because well, we heard so many interesting things, so many topics are being raised. Certainly the fact that the pandemic marks a point of no return somehow, and politics should also fix priorities considering the long-term perspective. And sometimes some long-term choices do not generate a short-term return, also in terms of consensus. So, Andy Bow, you are not a politician, but certainly, according to your profession, which are, in your opinion, the guidelines that could and should be followed? Which are the priorities that should be set in order to make cities better places to live?
Thank you. Well, I think one of the questions that I was asked to consider is really about how cities can become more attractive places to live, work, and visit. And so at this stage, I wanted to talk about the public realm. And when I first joined the practice 24 years ago, the first project I worked on was the project for Trafalgar Square and Parliament Square. It was called World Squares for All. And we consulted 180 different bodies, and we made more pedestrian intervention all around the centre of London. We discussed at the time congestion charges and cycle lanes, and all of those things continue. So one of the main things that I think cities can do for the greater benefit is to consider very carefully the space between buildings and connectivity. The second project I worked on was the Millennium Bridge. And the Millennium Bridge, at the last count, was getting more than 7 million people a year crossing it. And it in the summer, it was 20 years old. And so we can have a guess that over 100 million people have now crossed the Millennium Bridge. The visitors' numbers to St. Paul's have more than doubled, and the Tate Modern now has more than 6 million people a year. So I think part of what we have to consider is as cities evolve and change and the uses of individual sites change, the space between buildings becomes an incredible priority in how we move around cities as well. And we continue in our office to make these new interventions in London to make London a better place to live, work, and visit. The next one we will open is the rooftop gardens above our Crossrail station at Canary Wharf. And we're working on a new high street at the Battersea Power Station development, where we're doing a new high street with Frank Gehry. That's a master plan that intends to be very inclusive for all, a place for young and old. And I think that's amongst the things that have been described in the last 40 minutes. I think the mayor of Milan is right to highlight that people have suffered. My mother nearly died in the middle of the pandemic, 500 miles away. I couldn't go there. My son has been made redundant, and my daughter has been furloughed. So I really do believe that this pandemic has affected all of us in one way or another. But I still believe that the point of today's session is to really think about the positive things. So I wanted to mention the intervention at Trafalgar Square because I noted in the press that in Milan, there's been great inroads over the lockdown of interventions to increase the amount of pedestrian space and cycle lanes and so on. And I'll be very interested the next time I visit the city to see how that's all working. So that's my contribution at the moment. I was asked to consider how we use public space. Ironically, one of the things we might have to do next is figure out more ways that people can deliver things safely with the rise of online shopping. So, you know, it's a constant moving feast. I hope that's helpful.
su questi spunti appunto che ha lanciato.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowe, for your contribution. And now I'd like to go back to Mayor Gnassi of Rimini. Well, certainly Mr. Bowe mentioned aspects that link up to some initiatives carried out by the city of Rimini. But in the light of what has been said also over the last few years here at the meeting, I would like to talk about one thing that has emerged several times. Because certainly, as Mayor Sala said, where should we start from for a new start? So in your opinion, which are the best guidelines? So certainly the long-term perspective is very important. First of all, I do think that we need to be aware of the fact that processes should not be somehow passively experienced, but they should be interpreted, even though that may sound obvious, because then there are lobbies, there are groups of interest. But considering the quite unique moment and times we're going through, we should first of all develop a specific project for cities, and secondly, design real participative schemes. And it's not just about lip service. I mean, we should really do something concrete and practical. And I'm thinking about small and medium-sized cities in Italy that used to maybe be characterized by some sort of, lobby-related mechanisms. Well, stop with that. We should really promote participative approaches involving people from neighborhoods, as it was maybe the case in London. I mean, strategic planning should involve stakeholders. And we have looked at what people did in Northern Europe. We started the stakeholder involvement that changed the face of cities like in Stockholm, Hammarby, or the Freiburg participative process about sustainable energy development. And I also thought about the need of a transition from fossil fuels to renewable and sustainable energies. Energy plans at local level could be supported by specific town planning choices. So these things could go hand in hand, endorsed by stakeholder involvement. So we should start from the grassroots, from the neighborhoods, professionals, ordinary people. That's why we have decided to strengthen our strategic plan to outline the future perimeter of our city. So really, somehow renouncing a little bit of our sovereignty. It's not that we give up that, but we want to share it, because then the responsibility of choices should be strong and shared and endorsed if you really want to change direction. So if too much territory was used and misused, we need to do something to fix it and to really regenerate at urban level those areas, those wastelands, so to speak. And there's so much that could be done. Urban sprawl brought about huge damage. And then we have a digital rise, but then also promoting neighborhood shops. Because when it comes to future cities, I go back to Italo Calvino's words. We need to think about future cities that somehow take inspiration from the desert that is opposed to them. We need algorithm, but we also need squares. Squares are places for relations. We need drivers of sustainable reconversion, for cultural heritage. We have so many cultural assets that can and should be regenerated. We have urban contexts that have jewels in the crown, acknowledged by the UNESCO, but they are surrounded by degraded areas. So we need to work on squares, on algorithm. So weaving a fabric of stakeholders really involved, and mayors too need to be there available. I mentioned Freiburg, the German city, because to me is a very clear example of how each one of us can make their contribution. From London to Madrid to Milan to Rimini, we can all make the contribution to energy transition. We need national energy plans. Italy plays a key role in the Mediterranean, so it needs to develop a plan about wind energy. But you can't create wind parks in front of Venice or in front of the Dolce Vita beaches. Why did I mention Freiburg? Because the urban reconversion was interesting, and in particular there was a huge debate on nuclear energy at that time, and the local energy plan of that area somehow was very, very strongly developed, and so it contributed for more than 50% to the local energy need. So creating that was much better than creating a wind park, the Zillions wind park. So it's important to understand the potential of an area and provide different local solutions. So clear projects, participative democracy, stakeholder involvement. So now I would like to ask Mayor Sala of Milan to help us make a further step vis-a-vis what we have said so far, because you told us about the need to make choices, even though maybe these choices sound inconvenient for some stakeholders. And then we have decision-making processes. And as Madrid Mayor said, we need to build together the future of cities. So all those things are interconnected. And of course, a mayor is the leader of the city. And I would like to add another element to this patchwork, because sometimes it is harder to then put projects into practice. And instead, this is a crucial phase. And sometimes it's so hard that unless you intervene strongly, you can't. So again, a mayor has to make daily decisions like that on an almost regularly basis. So what does it really mean for you to build together and make decisions? Well, first of all, I would like to say that, well, Mr. Bow, you are invited to Milan straight away, anytime. We wait for you. And I may be a bit biased, but I do strongly believe in the strength of a city to be the engine of change. So the mayor of Madrid said that the strength and the force of Madrid are its citizens. Well, I mean, it's not that the citizens of large cities are always ready to embrace change, but instead what I do think is that very often they are maybe more available to accept a change, and they then give credit to the administration when credit, is legitimate, when credit is due. And certainly large cities are more subject to quick changes. Milan is part of C40, an association that gathers the largest cities in the world, and C40, whose president is the mayor of Los Angeles, decided to set up a task force to understand how to exit the pandemic crisis, and not just from a healthcare point of view, because, this unusual situation can be a driver for change. And I was entrusted with the leadership of this task force, and this is a great honor for me and for Milan. And I must say that we are getting so many inputs. Certainly, some of the things that are happening in London, and Mr. Bow mentioned those things, but Paris is working on the idea of a 15-minute city. So each citizen should be able to reach essential services within a 15-minute walk. And Barcelona is walking on pedestrianized neighborhoods. And Milan is thinking about similar ideas. So it's time now to dare, to be daring. It's time to be courageous, provided that we are clear and transparent to citizens. We are creating an additional 35 kilometers of cycling routes. Not everybody is happy. I hope that more than 50% of citizens will be happy, not just for election reasons, but for the well-being of the city. And as my friend Gnassi, mayor of Rimini, says, we need to share, to have support from stakeholders. Personally, and not all mayors agree on that, but I don't think that having external parties come into a city and imposing the implementation of things, well, I do not agree with this sort of solution. I think that it's time to fix many things that are not working. And Italy had so far 67 governments. So on an average, the average duration of a government is 1 year and 2 months. Instead, a mayor usually stays there for at least 5 years, sometimes 10. So either you like it or not, you like him or not, but you know the direction taken by that mayor. So putting cities under the administration of external commissioners, I think it's not the right solution. But certainly we have too much red tape in Italy, too much bureaucracy, too many rules, and sometimes when it comes to, the requests for calls for tenders, anybody can join call for tenders because, okay, there is free competition, but sometimes these calls for tenders are obtained by companies that cannot live up to the service, and then they somehow farm out the job to other people, and then they let you down. So things like that need to be fixed. Personally, I do think that change is okay, and certainly change will come from cities, large cities first, where we were flying high and we fell from above, and so it was hard, it was painful. But again, we have enough resources and creativity to come out of that. And I have a question, but do governments believe in cities? Do they really think and believe that cities will be the engine and the major driver of change? If they do, there are consequences, and they have to allocate tasks and resources to large metropolitan cities or even smaller cities like Rimini. And they have to do their part. Look at what Manchester did in the UK, how much money they got, but also how much responsibility. I'm not so sure that our government shares this belief. Instead, I think there should be more, transparency in that respect. To me, large cities are the key. And it's not just because I'm mayor of Milan, but it's based on my own experience. I've done a couple of things in 62 years of life. So is it true? Do politicians share that? If yes, they have to take up responsibilities and provide answers. Thank you, Mayor Sala. What you raised is a very interesting topic, and I hope that we will have in the future other opportunities to delve more into this. Well, what you mentioned has been discussed several times, and again, thank you very much for raising this topic, regardless of political parties, because it's really important to understand what is, the future also of the relationship between the state and the regions. And it is a topic we talked about yesterday morning during another session. Unfortunately, time flies, and I would love to spend hours talking with our guests, but I would like to take advantage of the very last few minutes to ask you for a final word. So so, Mr. Bow, we're not following the items that we had agreed upon, but please, just the last word, also to conclude our, weekly event, 1 week event, because this year's mating special edition had this title, Devoid of Wonder, We Remain Deaf to the Sublime. And this was a title that was chosen 1 year ago, so long before the COVID pandemic. And because we believe more than ever in the possibility of reconstructing things, of a new start, we strongly believe in the possibility to build a new future. And I think that this positiveness has emerged also from the words that all of you said. So from your point of view, of each one of you, that is certainly different because you come from different walks of life. So is it really possible to have such an hope, to make a new start, to rebuild things, and where to start from? Because we would really like to make a new start that should be based also on a sort of wonder and amazement in spite of the tragedy. So Mr. Bow first, and then Mr. Gnassi, and then Mr. Sala. So Mr. Bow.
I'd like to conclude just picking up on the Mayor of Rimini's point about stakeholder engagement and conversations with the public that surround the projects that we work on. And for us, this is crucial. I mentioned on the Trafalgar Square project, I myself was involved in many, many meetings for a long time, and we spoke to 180 different bodies to try and get this balance right about more pedestrian intervention or not. I think it's very, very important because in the end, the city belongs to everybody. And I have to say on the Battersea Power Station development there, they've led an incredible program of local engagement and bringing in new scholarships and having local guys working on site and the local schools coming in and seeing the project development. So I think, make safe, friendly and inspiring cities, reach out to the people and listen. And then we all rebuild together, all of us, and we're all engaged in the process.
Grazie, Andrea.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gnassi. Well, certainly the time ahead is challenging and exciting because we're going to have the opportunity to experience change in a deep way, and we won't be alone because certainly stakeholder engagement can transform cities and neighborhoods. And here, thanks to that approach, these 16 waterfront kilometers of the Rimini municipalities are full of landmarks that are typical of our identity. We rediscovered deep ground water sources. We rediscovered the post-industrial architectural facilities and places from the past that have been then regenerated thanks to the strength and gaze and ideas of the local inhabitants. So stakeholder engagement will give in more strength to these radical and compelling and uncompromising choices. So the last word to Mayor Sala. Well, I think that what cities will do from a certain point of view will be similar from place to place because we live similar situations. But also, on the other hand, they will be specific. Milan has 26 centuries of history, and I'm convinced that, well, Milan has always embraced change and always given its best when doing so. Some say that Milan is a model that is going through a crisis. Well, I think that we have been hit very, very hard by the COVID. By the way, we had 2,200 casualties. However, when a model is based on quality, values, well, you always find a way. The Milan formula will be to work on the power of its young people, of its university, of its cultural world, on its ability to have public and private work together, and solidarity. All those values are not lost, not at all. And of course, before telling the others what to do, it's important to understand what we can do. And the local administration here in Milan, first of all, has to listen, certainly, but then to propose a formula, to submit a project likely to outline the future landscape of the city, and basing ourselves on our core values that have not been lost in spite of the 5 months of difficulty. We're being hit very hard. Everybody has been hit very hard. We are maybe weaker, but we are not defeated. So just let's start working together again. We will need to work hard, very hard. We need willingness, but we're going to make it. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Mayor Sala, for these encouraging words, and thank you to our guests. So that's exactly what we wanted to do this year, in spite of the difficulties. That's why we called it Special Edition, because it was nice and interesting and encouraging to talk to other people, sharing these views. It is possible, in spite of the difficult situation, of the tragedy, it's possible to somehow raise our heads and start working again together, trying to look at the future with positivity to make a new start altogether. I think that you certainly tapped into these elements of encouragement and positivity, and I hope that you will take that as take-home message. Thank you very much to our guests. Thank you for listening, and see you very, very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Generali, partner di vita. Generali, partner di vita.